Welcome back to my podcast, dear listeners. We're in episode 85, and today I'll tell you about Bunny. But before that, I wanted to touch upon the morality and ethics of sneaking around behind your parents' backs to meet guys, because this is what I had started doing. When it comes to the ethics and morality of going behind my parents' backs and inviting a guy home, or even going to his place for some intimacy, did I think I was doing something wrong or immoral? Well, here's my stance. I considered myself to be a good person, a spiritual person, even. I held myself to high ethical standards. How then could this dissonance of apparent sinful or unethical behavior coexist with my perception of myself? For one, I had gone and spoken to my mom about getting married when I was pretty much younger. Difficult as it had been for me to go up to the person who was primarily responsible for my messed up sense of self, knowing I would be ridiculed and not taken seriously, I still gathered my courage and had the conversation. Instead of understanding where I was coming from, I was ridiculed and my wish was brushed aside flippantly. Secondly, I knew intuitively that young people were always meant to mingle and get to know each other freely without any of these modern day Puritan restrictions. I knew that ancient Indians had been liberal and carefree in this respect before invaders had made them hide their daughters. It was not just hormones that were driving me into the arms of potential suitors. It was a deeper longing to connect with another human being at the most intimate level. Even when I would hang out with Farzad, Ruby had questioned me with a disgusted facial expression why I was hanging out with that guy of all people. To look for a husband, I'd answered. The goal had always been to find my special person. Other than that, I did genuinely believe that the norms of conservative societies did not necessarily reflect the longings of the soul or the spirit. The norms were all very well for controlling people and maintaining law and order, but I felt that the best guide for what was right and wrong was inner intuition. And that is why, even though I did things that a conservative person would frown upon and refer to as immoral, I knew in my heart that it was anything but. Why do we thwart the young in the pursuit of love, especially the girls? In a way, I understand. We want to protect our children from abuse or assault or disease and pregnancy. All of these things are very possible when young people interact freely, so I get it. But also, if you just marry the first person who ever expressed any interest in dating you, what are the chances that you would be compatible? There are definitely people in such arranged matches who end up with a perfectly compatible mate, or even not an arranged match, but the first person you ever date. You could end up being their perfectly compatible mate. But that is more a result of statistical probability rather than any actual criteria. So, on the one hand, I did try to do the right thing to go along with the norms of a conservative society and the behavior expected in my conservative family by asking my mom to find me a husband. And on the other hand, when I started looking for love on my own, I did know that I probably would have to kiss several frogs before I found my prince. I also fretted not being able to go to places where the chances of meeting like minded young people were high. Mom guarded us like a dragon, and it was difficult to go out in the evenings and hang out at places where young people could meet and intermingle. And then there was the issue of my severe inferiority complex. If I ever did find myself in a place like that, I would spend the entire time feeling super self conscious and worrying about how I would mess it up. I would worry if I would hear the person properly above the din of the loud music. I would worry about coming across as stupid or exposing my stupidity because I knew I was not as smart as the average person. I would worry about being clumsy and spilling food or drink on myself. I did that very often. And I also worried about fitting in among cool people. Not an enviable position to be in, I know. In spite of all this, my friend Pippi sought my advice to get her crush to like her back. She asked me to explain what to do to win him over. I tried to tell her how to flirt, and as I was giving her this advice, so to say, I realized that I never actually planned or put any thought into it. Whenever I had been with someone, it happened spontaneously and naturally. Yet, I felt kind of proud that my friend was seeking guy advice from me. And so I did give her some tips that I hoped would help her. Meanwhile, life continued. There were such few Punjabis in Hillside, in fact, the entire Godrej complex. Considering the long duration for which we all lived together, they got to know each other. But all the Punjabis of Hillside were more urbane and worldly wise than my mother. Like when I met them, I could see they were different from us. They all spoke to their children in Hindi, not Punjabi, and we spoke Thet Punjabi. These other Punjabi families were more liberal, from more affluent families, better educated, and had grown up in cities. None of them were Jat, who were typically the more rural farmer community. The Jats who were in the cities in the 80s or 90s were typically truck owners or petrol pump owners, typically more crude and less refined than the people we referred to as pappe or bhappas. When other people say pappe, they mean these bhappas. That's one of the sub communities. Of course, there were some Jat Sikhs who were officers in the armed forces or well off government officers in Chandigarh or engineers, but they were few and far between and not really in our inner circles. Mom was always painfully aware of her relative lack of education and did have a huge complex about her ability to speak English. In reality, her grasp over the language was way better than many, and she just had a Punjabi accent, that's all. But I think mom also felt the social distance between her upbringing and theirs. Our school principal was a Punjabi, Mr. Madan. He reached out and asked to hang out with our family. The Madans were very relaxed and chill people. I remember being super scandalized when his daughter wore miniskirts right in front of him. She was happily prancing around in the hallways of Udyachal High School like that, and I was like, no way, she's wearing miniskirts right in front of her dad and he doesn't beat her to a pulp? What? She doesn't have to do this in secret? It felt like these other Punjabis lived in a parallel world that seemed to be so near yet so far away from my life. My mom took me to Mr. Madan's place and she had 2 video cassettes of Punjabi movies. Mom was pretty clueless about socializing in the city. Remember, I had mentioned how at parties she would skulk around behind the boss's wife, looking so out of place. The video cassettes were religious devotional movies, very serious. At the end of watching, Mr. Madan said, "Hey, how about more fun and chill movies next time?" I was mortified when I realized that mom had misjudged this social hangout as some kind of morality lesson time. I was embarrassed for her. She had no idea how to relax and party. She was always very uptight and serious. Another Punjabi family in Hillside, other than the Madans, were the Sodis. They had 2 sons, and the younger one, Bunny, was my batchmate. The typical feedback from his teacher to his parents was that he was not applying himself. In 10th standard, his percentage was lower than mine, yet he took up science for 11th and 12th and went to an engineering college in Dharwad. In school, Bunny and I barely spoke. One of my most vivid memories of Bunny in school was during the PT period marching practice. The PT sir gave the command, "Daine Mud," and all of us were always confused between which one is Daine and which one is Bae, left or right. These are the Hindi counterparts of left and right. So we would discreetly look at each other for cues as to which way we needed to turn when the command was given. So Sir called out, "Daine Mud," and we all turned left. All, that is, except Bunny. Bunny had turned right. We thought Bunny would quickly correct himself when he saw us, but he stayed put, the only kid facing the other way. Well, As it turns out, we were all wrong, and Bunny was right. Dahine is right and Bae is left. After that day, I remembered it. Whilst we barely interacted in school, Bunny and I actually started talking afterwards, with Bunny often joining me for evening walks whenever he visited Hillside. His dad had gotten a job elsewhere and they had moved to Bhandup. We bonded and became friends. Later, when Bunny moved to Dharwad for engineering, we started writing letters to each other. Mom considered Mrs. Sodhi a good friend. I could see that Auntie had grown up in an affluent family with a lavish lifestyle. She was an expert card player and was very social, into her kitty party group and such stuff. This world was alien to us. She was very stylish in the way she dressed and presented herself. Sometimes, when she grumbled about how often her husband had to travel for work, Mom very generously offered that one of us sisters could keep her company overnight. This was probably a common practice in the village, but I'm not sure how comfortable Mrs. Sodhi was with this. I'm afraid my mother's well intentioned offer actually ended up with us imposing on her. She now had the task of entertaining guests instead of just relaxing when she had the house to herself. As Bunny and I were writing to each other, I inadvertently caused a problem for his family. I didn't realize I could even mess up long distance, but I managed that feat too. So basically, Bunny was in Dharwad, and one day Mrs. Sodhi was over at our house talking about how her older son, who was studying in the US, was coming down for a short visit. They did not want to disrupt Bunny's studies and had decided not to inform him, else he'd want to travel back and meet his brother. Well, I wrote all this to Bunny in my letter, not with any malicious or sly intent, but just for no reason, with zero thought put into what I was writing or why. I was just writing. Bunny read my letter and arrived in Bombay, furious that his parents would deprive him of a chance to meet his brother and were planning to just not inform him. And I was responsible for this family conflict. Well done, Tiny. This one little incident gives you insight into just how bright I was when it came to decision making or strategizing. Basically, zero skill. Bunny was not an attractive boy, but not unattractive either. He was a little overweight, with a teeny belly overflowing over his belt. Posture not too great either. His older brother had hit the lottery in the looks department, getting all the great features from his mother. As far as we were concerned, we'd never met him and he was way older than us, so we had no thoughts about this older brother. Bunny's dad looked pleasant, even though he was barely as tall as his wife. He looked fit and had good posture. Everyone in that family, other than Bunny, seemed to be trim and fit. So basically, Bunny's inattention to his health and fitness put him on the lowest rung of the beauty ladder within that family. In addition, Bunny was also a mumbly speaker, and what he said often sounded garbled to me. I was in the habit of finding a few keywords and responding to what he said. Yet again, my hearing monster had reared its ugly head to interfere with my life. So I was still very much in the phase of being around mumbly people and pretending I understood everything they said. So, as one could guess, at no point did I consider Bunny attractive, but I enjoyed his company and thought he was very sweet. And when I saw that he was falling for me, I was not averse to the idea. One evening, I was preparing rotis for dinner, and Bunny's best friend Navroz came over. I was in the middle of work and had no time to drop everything and just hang out because someone had decided to drop by. That was not the time of texting or calling and checking if someone was actually free to hang out. People were in the habit of just dropping by unannounced because they happened to be in the area or something. So when Navroz came in and I was in the middle of making rotis, I had to continue that. So I offered him a stool to sit on in the kitchen and to chat with me if he wished. I was dressed very dowdy with a super loose and misshapen outfit because mom preferred it that way, and I was always desperate for mom's approval. Navroz had never met me, and it was weird that he suddenly dropped by to spend time with me and talk to me, but I didn't really give it any thought, and continued making rotis while I chatted with him. After a while, Navroz left. Turns out he had dropped by to check if he approved of me for his friend. Apparently, after spending some time with me, he had given Bunny his blessings to go ahead and ask me to be his girlfriend, or as we called it at the time, to go ahead and propose. This was a friend looking out for his friend, making sure that he wasn't falling for the wrong girl. Ha! With Navroz's approval, Bunny expressed his feelings to me, and I was interested. I was tickled about the idea. A couple of days later, Bunny landed up at the university campus with his car. I was impressed and excited. He asked me if I wanted to go out for a drive. I was delighted and told my friends that I was ditching class for the whole day. I wondered what fun adventures lay ahead, what Bunny had planned, where we would go, where we would eat. Well, Bunny drove around for maybe 5 or 10 minutes and brought me right back to campus. I was confused and hurt. What just happened? I was kind of fuming when I stepped out of the car and really disappointed. I could only imagine what my classmates would think when they saw me walk into class meekly. I left the car, came back to class, and the first class for the day had not even started. I felt humiliated. Was this boy stupid? Like, what was the point of this? How dare he treat me like this? I just got angrier and angrier the more I thought about it, and I felt more and more humiliated. I pretty much lost interest in Bunny in that instant. Later, Bunny told me that when his friends heard about his visit, they told him that he had messed up. But it didn't matter. I had closed the chapter in my mind. I was done. At that age, and without the hindsight that I have now, this was a deal breaker for me. Afterwards, Bunny and I kept talking from time to time. And after a few more evening walks, Bunny mentioned that he understood that sometimes his speech was not too clear. This made me realize that he knew I wasn't following everything that he said. Had he asked me questions while I just smiled and nodded? Yeah, that was very much possible, which made my conviction even stronger that this was not the guy for me. Did I want to spend the rest of my life with someone whose words I did not understand and would have to constantly ask him to repeat himself? I think not. By this time, I was not really close to Swati either at university and was mostly resentful of the situation she had put me in. So there was nobody to talk to about this. Besides, in my young mind, I thought I'd have plenty of opportunities to meet the love of my life. I know, but I was 20. What can I say? Bunny and I continued to be friends, and later he confided in me about a girl he was attracted to. I encouraged him to speak to her. He would share personal and intimate details of the relationship with me. So basically, I became the confidant. Later, Bunny moved to California, where I assume his brother also lived. Later, I remember seeing a photograph, maybe on Facebook, not sure, of Bunny with an expensive car in front of a beautiful house. I was surprised at how well he was doing, and my mind immediately went to how his 10 standard score had been lower than mine. Of course, at the time, I was too naive to understand all the other factors that go into making a person successful. Once Bunny left, we were no longer in touch. And that was the end of the Bunny chapter. My parents continue to be friends with the Sodis to this day. For me, another opportunity to find love lost due to poor decision making skills and due to my extreme complex about my hearing issues. In my family, rather, I just speak for myself. I reached adulthood ill equipped with any life skills or emotional coping skills. Life could have turned out very differently, even with just a few wise advisors, or even one. I never discussed this with my parents because of how they'd brought us up to fear them and to keep secrets from them. If I'd told them about Bunny, maybe they could have given me some advice. Anyway, that chapter was closed. And yet again, I was by myself, still waiting to meet that special someone. That's it for today. I'll see you next time with another story, another chapter out of my life. Till then, stay happy, stay healthy. Bye for now.